Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. The past 7 months was the coolest and wettest October through May on record in the United States. In this video, I'm going to show you why that's important and how the experts got everything exactly backwards. This map from NOAA shows in green and blue areas of the country which had below normal temperatures. As you can see, more than 2/3 of the U.S. was below normal since October. And precipitation was far above normal. It was the wettest October through May on record in U.S. history. So let's keep that in mind. It was cold and it was wet. That's important. This graph shows the October through May percent of days above 60 degrees Fahrenheit at all United States Historical Climatology Network stations. The year with the most warm days was 1933 through 34, and 2018 through 2019 was by far the coolest. Same story with 70-degree days. 1934 was by far the warmest, and this past winter was by far the coolest. The average daily maximum temperature was actually not the coolest. It was second coolest after 1899. Last autumn, NOAA predicted the exact opposite. Winter outlook favors warmer temperatures for much of the U.S., wet southern states to contrast drought in the west. And this was NOAA's winter forecast map. It was supposed to be very warm out in the west. Well, I spent the first half of the winter in Phoenix, and it definitely was not hot or dry. I took these pictures a little east of Phoenix on New Year's Day. Snow on the saguaro cactus is pretty unusual, and it happened several times this winter. NOAA predicted drought in the west, but we're actually having an historically low amount of drought in the United States right now. Remember that October through May 1934 was the warmest and was also the driest on record. This is the NOAA map of U.S. drought from June 1934. There was an incredible drought which covered 80% of the country. So this is very important. October through May 1934 was the warmest and driest on record in the U.S., and the past October through May was the coolest and wettest. This is not a coincidence. Cool air can't hold as much water vapor as warm air does. That's why we get precipitation when a cold front comes through. So during warm winters, we tend to get less precipitation because the water vapor remains in the air. But when the air is cold, it can't hold as much moisture, so it tends to precipitate out as snow or rain. What normally causes precipitation in the winter is cool air coming down from the Arctic or from the Pacific and colliding with warmer, moist air. In the mountains of California, it's a little bit different. You get very moist air coming in off the Pacific, and as it gets forced up over the Sierra Nevadas, it cools and snow falls. But in both cases, the precipitation is due to moist air cooling. During the warm, dry winter of 1934, there wasn't a lot of cold air coming down into the United States. This was the Weather Bureau temperature anomaly map from January 1934. Almost the entire United States was above normal temperature during January 1934, and Montana was an incredible 20 degrees above normal. Without cold Arctic air coming down and forcing the water vapor to condense out of the air, it stayed very dry, and thus the extreme drought of 1934. This is the exact opposite of what some climate experts in the press are claiming. They're blaming the floods and severe weather on global warming, when in fact it was caused by the fact that we had record cold. The fact that winter precipitation is associated with cold air and cold fronts is one of the most fundamental principles of atmospheric physics. It's astonishing that some climate scientists don't seem to understand it. And the same story with tornadoes. They've been long understood to occur when cold, dry air collides with warm, moist air. And that's exactly what we've been seeing this spring. We've been getting lots of cold air coming down into the United States and producing lots of severe weather and tornadoes. Some climatologists claim that they predicted the cold and increase in precipitation all along, but that's simply not true. They predicted the exact opposite. When NASA's James Hansen started the modern global warming scale before Congress in 1988, look at what he predicted. Prepare for long, hot summers. If you like last summer's record temperatures, you're going to love the 1990s, says James Hansen, the NASA scientist who, during congressional hearings on the Midwestern drought, linked greenhouse warming to the heat wave. Washington, D.C., for instance, would go from its current 35 days a year over 90 degrees to 85 days a year. So let's see how Hansen's predictions panned out. This is the number of 90-degree days per year at Lincoln, Virginia, which is the closest Virginia United States Historical Climatology Network station to Washington, D.C. The exact opposite of what Hansen predicted has occurred. The number of 90-degree days per year at Lincoln, Virginia has plummeted since the 19th century. Back then they got about 50 days per year, and now they're down to about 25. This was the date of Hansen's forecast. He predicted a huge increase up to about 85 days per year, but we've seen the exact opposite. I spent a few summers across the river from Lincoln, Virginia and Gaithersburg, Maryland, and never turned the air conditioning on. It just doesn't get that hot there anymore. Hansen also predicted a big increase in the number of hot days in the Midwest. Once again, he got that exactly backwards. This graph is the percent of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit at all Midwest United States Historical Climatology Network stations. The frequency of hot days in the Midwest has dropped in half since the 19th century, and Hansen's forecast was made during the last really hot summer there. It just hasn't happened again. In his 1988 testimony, Hansen also predicted a big increase in drought in the Midwest, but once again the exact opposite has occurred. This is a graph of precipitation in the Midwest since the 19th century, and as you can see it's increased. And the last really dry summer was the year he made that forecast. It's been very wet there ever since. In fact, they've been having record rain and snow there in recent years. Hansen had no idea what he was talking about. He got all of his predictions exactly backwards. And the reason for that is his beliefs are based on superstition, not science. He believes that the 1 part per 10,000 increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide over the last century controls the climate. There's no reason to believe that. It's nonsense. NOAA got the winter forecast backwards, and the long-term forecasts are even much worse. These people have no idea what they're talking about when they make forecasts more than a few days out. But the people making these forecasts will never admit it because there's too much money, power, and prestige wrapped up in this scam at this point. The people benefiting from the scam are going to keep lying for as long as they continue to get paid to do so. Some years I go hiking in the high country above Boulder the first weekend in June, but it's not going to happen this year. This is a picture from a webcam up there taken today. It's going to be a long time before I can get up there. We have record snowpack in the West, and they're going to be skiing in California well into August. The great American physicist Richard Feynman said, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts." The press and many politicians treat climate scientists as if they're some sort of prophets, when in fact many of them are much closer to being clowns. I use the term exactly backwards a lot in this video, and that pretty much typifies climate science. Superstition has always dominated many people's beliefs about weather and climate, and now is certainly no different. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.